Hi, this is Taylor DeSoto, and I am starting a webcast on various issues in the culture, in society, in politics, in education. And I want to approach these topics from a biblical worldview. And I know there are guys doing this already, men and women that are already engaging with this topic, but I think that at this point in history, more and more Christians need to really start standing up for what's good and true and right, and really coming to the aid of the helpless and the poor and orphaned and widows. And I think that one of the ways that we can do this is the modern day printing press, which is the internet. And the more Christians that stand up, or sit down in my case, who say something, who engage with some of these issues and societal trends that are going on, I think that we're going to find people are going to realize they have a voice and they have the power to impact culture for the gospel. In the Great Commission, Christ says to go and make disciples of all nations, and if we're to believe that he is ruling over heaven and earth, he has all authority given to him, then we have the power to impact culture. We have the power to really impact this world for the gospel. So today I wanted to talk a little bit. I've got it on my phone here. This quote by it's absurd. So this man is a self-proclaimed, or woman is a self-proclaimed sexuality expert, saying that parents should seek consent before changing their baby's diaper. So sexuality expert Deanne Carson said that it is important to teach a child that their response matters from a young age, and provided an example of the parent asking their baby for consent to change their diaper. Has this woman ever had a child? It's absurd. Babies cannot ask to have their diaper changed. The way they ask and give consent is they yell at you, they scream at you, and they say in their own language, "I'm uncomfortable. I've soiled myself." And as a parent, you have an obligation to make sure that your baby is taken care of, that your baby is being fed, and a child cannot consent at that age to anything. All they can do is be fully and 100% dependent on their parents, and that's emotionally, that's physically, that's every single need that these little humans need is provided by the parents, and it's a tremendous responsibility. And if this is the kind of thing that people are just kind of creating in their head, where babies have to give consent for you to take care of them, you would have babies sitting in their own waste until they were old enough to ask and give consent to change their diaper. And what's more offensive in all this is, I think there's this implication that somehow changing a diaper is some sort of sexual thing, and that's offensive to me as a parent. The fact that anyone would view my children as a sexual thing at that age, it's horribly offensive. There is nothing sexual about changing a diaper, or even about a baby at all. They don't do anything sexual. Children do not do sexual things until they're exposed to sexual things, like drag queens reading them stories at a Brooklyn library, telling them to swing their hips back and forth at a very young age, that kind of thing. That's the kind of insanity that causes children to be sexual at a young age, because children are not that way. They don't think sexually. And so to impose that sort of thinking on parents, to impose the fact that I need to get consent to take care of my daughter, no. That's the kind of result that we get when people abandon science, when people abandon reasoning and empirical, evidential claims to truth. When you start to make feelings matter more than what is true, you're now issuing mandates that parents need to get consent to take care of their children. And what we're going to see, and what we're already seeing, is a breakdown of the fabric, the moral fabric of this country and of this world, in these societies, these Western societies. We're going to have, and we already are experiencing, the result of society creating their own morality. So I'll end with that. And when I say society creating its own morality, the fact that even though biological science says that a baby is a human being from conception, they have all the biological parts, all the biological stuff to be considered a human being that is alive. And the people that are pro-choice advocates recognize this. They know this. There's no dispute about that. What they're actually arguing for is a reconstruction of the societal moral framework, which is, sure, it's a human being, but I can still kill it. That's what they're saying. Because they've abandoned a moral standard. And when you abandon moral standards, you see that kind of thing going on. 60 million babies murdered since Roe v. Wade. You see, and I know that people are not going to like this, but when you break down the marriage unit, that marriage is between a man and a woman, you open up the gate for a lot of other types of marriages, because they're not marriages between, and you might call me crazy for saying this, but man and woman, that's not a marriage. And where are they going next? I should be able to marry both of my partners. Do you see there's a problem with that? Because the standard for marriage now is I can do what I feel is right. And that's the direction that it's already heading. You already have people starting to do this kind of thing. And that's what people said 10 years ago, when these kinds of bills and legislation were starting to gain popularity. We're there. The predictions are coming true. This is not conspiracy theory. It's happening. This matters because the state wants to raise our children up. According to the state, they don't want parents to have any control over whether or not they can change their own children's diapers, whether they or not they can educate their children. That's why this matters. Parents, Christians, if you're listening to this, you have the right to take care of your child. You have the right to educate your child, and you have the right to pull your children out of public school, and I think you should. You have an obligation to do so at this point. Because what you're commended to, raise your children up in the way they ought to go, that they may not depart from the faith later on. And you have children who are being raised by the state with about 30 minutes a week of family discipleship, which is not enough. They're getting 6 hours a day of the state's discipleship, and you think 30 minutes a week is good enough for them to be raised up in the way they ought to go? That's absurd. Their souls are more important than having 2 cars in the garage. Their souls are way more important than being comfortable. That's the sacrifice that we ought to make as Christians. We ought to sacrifice one of our incomes, and churches ought to help parents do this. Stand up for your right to take care of your children, to raise your children up. You have that right as of now. It'll go away if we don't start standing up. And with that, I think I may have to go. Thanks for listening, everybody. More to come. We're going to be engaging the culture, engaging these kinds of, these articles and these tweets and these things that people are saying that are objectively wrong. That parents cannot change their kid's diaper without consent. It's absurd. We're going to be engaging these kinds of things. So hopefully you tune in next week. Again, I'm Taylor DeSoto. Have a great rest of your day. May the Lord keep you.